This is WOMMLP operating out of Burlington, Vermont, 105.9 The Radiator. It is the Rocket Shop. Good evening. I'm your host, Tom Proctor. And with me tonight is Louis Betancourt, sorry.
Yeah, that's perfect. That sounds nice.
We were debating for so long how to say your first name that I didn't even think about your second.
Louis, I like the way you said Betancourt.
Well, Louis, I hope you're well. It's been a bit of a weird, muggy day, so at least the strings are keeping nice and moist and
They
happening.
are. Yeah, I spent it on a boat, so that was kind of nice.
You spent it on a boat?
Some friends in town, so I live in North Hero right now, so we're surrounded by water. So what else to do on a nice summer day?
I was going to say it's probably just you commute, get on a boat.
I'm on my sea legs right now, so this room is swaying a bit. It feels good.
Well, we always love starting it off with a song. So what have you got for us?
All right, this first song is called Jesus, Don't You Sweat My Situation. It's not a religious song, but it's a song off an album I did a few years back called Pretty Music for the Mouth. Jesus, don't you sweat my situation. All of my sins are well accounted for. Maybe you should put in for vacation. I'll attend to mine if you attend to yours. But for heaven's sake, don't lock the door. Jesus, don't you stay my execution. You can relate to crimes worth dying for. Leave this body just as I have used it, less a temple than a motel on the shore. Stayed and shuddered forevermore. The cloud repairs to sea and stairs, upward wandering this changes state, the added weight and its shapelessness. Is this transfiguration or simply transformation? Would you rather be a window screen than one that's shade is drawn upward to reveal the dawn of your true self turning on?
Louis Betancourt there with Jesus, Don't You Sweat My Situation. As you mentioned at the top of the song, not a religious one.
Nah.
Obviously, Jesus, a bit of a central character in it. I am assuming, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that Jesus was another entity that you're speaking to in that song. So do you want to talk to me a little bit about that? It's a beautiful song, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's, a lot of my songs are a little bit more, I guess, lyrically, for lack of a better word, impressionistic or whatever. But I was trying to write a song that might be a little bit more character-driven, so I was kind of imagining somebody on death row. I think I'd been reading the news or whatever, and so I was trying to write it from that perspective a little bit, and maybe somebody who is not necessarily religious, but who at that moment kind of turns to this other, being, higher entity. And and just imagining what just basically being like, hey, don't sweat it. Don't sweat my situation. This is where I'm at, and my life has led to this moment. And also this idea of like transfiguration versus transformation, as I said in the song, just like the process of change and this moment, of execution, obviously being an instant transformation or a transfiguration. And I guess makes it seem like a more of a transforming into a more exalted, graceful entity or whatever. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that was a fantastic answer. It then prompted the question of the songs you're writing, do you tend to put yourself in other people's shoes as you're writing them and trying to see things from other people's perspective rather than your own? Or is this kind of anomaly and you kind of usually write from your own perspective, or is it maybe a bit of a mix of the two?
I think as I get older, it becomes a mix of the two, but I think generally it's an anomaly of sorts. I tend to write from more of an autobiographical perspective, I guess, but it's a fun exercise, to try to step outside of that a little bit.
And I guess most songs are autobiographical anyway. I'm sure even when you were writing this song,
Absolutely.
It was yourself in that situation rather than maybe that person themselves.
Right. It's like I think, when I wrote this song, it was around the time of a little bit of a tumultuous time and in my life, I guess, and just losing friends who, suddenly, and just, I guess it just kind of puts you into that place of looking back at your own life a little bit and looking at what's beyond. Exactly. So
Completely. And obviously mortality, or looking into the face of mortality at various ages ends up creating a lot of different thoughts depending on where obviously you are in your own journey, but then also especially the age that you're at.
Right.
And yeah, as I said, beautiful song. I'm really glad you shared it with us.
Cheers. Thank you. I appreciate that.
So as you kind of mentioned, you before we came on air, you grew up in Colchester. You recently moved back from Brooklyn.
Yes.
Lived there for a couple of years myself. Fun place. Too much for me, obviously. I only lasted 2 years before I tapped out. But for you, what prompted the move home?
Well, I had been there for, counted on, I went there to go to school and when I was 17 and ended up being there for like 24 years. So, that's the way New York works. But yeah, I have a family. My wife is from Burlington originally. We had been living out there for a while, and then we had our first daughter, Una. She's 6 now, but we had her out there, and then of course, like the world went a little bit crazy. We had our second child right at the kind of the beginning of the pandemic.
Oh, that's fun. That's fun for you.
So yeah, that was fun, and I guess I had my fun in Brooklyn and lived my life there, and kind of wanted to come back to a more calm, some more space, breathe in some fresh air, raise some kids, and we have a lot of family here as well and friends, so it just seemed like a natural move. I mean, we didn't count on moving to North Europe, but there was also, we didn't have many pickings for housing, so to speak. So, but I actually love it out there. I love the islands, and
I mean, it's gorgeous spot. I mean, it is a little bit out there, but even in the dead of winter, I mean, it's still absolutely stunning out there. It's you went to Brooklyn when you were 17 though, and yet you still ended up with a woman from Burlington. Did you go out with her, or did that just kind of serendipitously? That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I met her here. Well, during one of my trips back, and we were actually both going out to Oregon, to Portland, like separately. We both had that plan, so we ended up out there for 3 months. I couldn't find any work. Sold all our clothes and bought concert tickets and such, and then went back. I was like, well, where you can get a slice of pizza at like 2 in the morning. Good old New York. So yeah, we ended up back there, and we were out there for about 17 years. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I just did my toe in the water, so I can only imagine what it would have been like to be there for, as you said, 23 years in total.
Yeah, about 23, 24. Yeah.
And the change you must have seen in that time, because you must have gone there like late 90s
Yeah, it was like
ish.
97. Yeah, I went to NYU, so I was living in Manhattan for a couple of years, and then, you know, made my way across the river to Brooklyn like in 2000. So like I mean, Williamsburg was like not. I was living there first, and it was not even
Too
anything.
expensive in the end.
Yeah. Oh God, now forget it. Yeah.
I love NYU for its. There's apparently a magnet from NYU to Burlington, and every now and then someone just kind of gets into that traction and comes to Burlington. Obviously, you did it the other way around, but there is a fair few of your alumni kicking around. I quite like it. I've never met someone from NYU without a million great stories.
Yeah, it was fun for sure. But I mean, after college, I thought it was even better. You know, for a long time. We ended up in Red Hook, Brooklyn, for the better part of my life there, and I loved. I mean, that community was very important to me. So
I suppose North Hill is not that dissimilar in the fact it is a million miles away from where everything else is going on. So you prepared yourself
Yeah,
before
yeah.
you came back at the very least.
yes, exactly. Yeah, just a small shift.
So I did read that you used to run a monthly songwriter showcase in New York. Super fascinated about that. Also, we'll touch on Lana Del Rey in a little while. But tell me about that experience. As you quite clearly, at least by the first song, maybe the rest of the songs are trash, but the first song, brilliant lyricism, really sticks the listener right in that situation, and great turns of phrases. As now, obviously, a very experienced songwriter yourself, what was it like, and what did you learn hosting that in such a cultural melting pot as New York?
I mean, it was intimidating at first. I mean, that's what brought me to New York ultimately. I mean, I wanted to go to NYU just because I wanted to be in the village, but it was just a couple decades behind. But yeah, I mean, I was just always surrounded by incredible musicians, like people playing everything, from like new soul to like, hip hop to punk. And I just, I felt like it was always like a petri dish, kind of sorts. As I got older, I just fell into different pockets, different kind of music communities, and where I ended up doing my monthly. I used to run this monthly called the Hookland Holler, and it was at this wonderful spot that's still there called Jalopy, and it's a theater of music. It's a nonprofit. They just do incredible stuff there, and they really fostered a community of like a lot of folk musicians. Like, I think that was like the initial thing. So I played in string bands and jug bands there as well with other musicians who really dug old folk music. But with the Hookland Holler, I was really trying to do a singer-songwriter showcase of all styles, because I kind of felt like that was something that we needed more of in Brooklyn. I felt like, the early 90s, it was more, early 2000s, it was more like, the hub of the Strokes and everybody else like doing that kind of thing. So, and then
I mean, you got the voice for it at least, so I'm sure you were. I'm sure you were like right in the middle of that because of this very distinctive voice. But yeah,
thank you.
I mean, we all got taken over by the early 2000s indie.
And it was wonderful. I mean, I loved it. I mean, I was all, I had a punk band for years in Brooklyn. This band called AVO, AVO, and just a couple buddies of mine. This one guy who I think is the greatest drummer in the world, and my friend Ronnie, who's also actually in Burlington right now. But that was more of like a Talking Heads, Minutemen, like SST sort of vibe. So I guess Brooklyn just like allowed me, or that environment allowed me to really try different musical styles, and there was always people there ready to play in that, in those genres, because I like to skip around a lot. So
we hear a lot about how Burlington has this very open and nurturing musical scene, and is always in this comparison of, well, elsewhere it's backstabby, elsewhere it's crabs in a barrel. But from the way you're talking about Brooklyn, it doesn't sound like the way at all. It does sound very kind of, if you're willing to give it a go, or you're willing to share yourself with other people, then there'll be always people there to kind of help you make that music. I mean, are we getting it wrong? Most likely.
No, that's spot on. Actually, I think that's my experience for sure. Yeah, I think if you're on that other, yeah, I feel like the Brooklyn had such a spotlight on it for such a long time that, I heard a lot of those stories too. But I was like, that's just not my experience. Yeah, very open-minded.
I think it's such a big city. You can kind of make what you want with it, and if you need that, or if you want that kind of community where people help each other out, you can find it. And if you want I will sell my grandmother in order to get on stage at Madison Square Garden, you can probably find that as well. So I'm glad you're
I might
the
have probably
former.
done that at one point too.
But we'd love to hear another song from you.
All right, cool.
So what you got for us?
So I have a lot of. This is a fairly new song. I wrote it this past winter. So it's not even properly recorded. I have like a demo version on my Bandcamp, but it's called Wonderful. It was more of a, a lot of these songs are much more fleshed out and produced. So like, being a singer-songwriter playing out with an acoustic guitar really strips it down, but there's a lot more going on in the recorded versions of these. So yeah, this one's called Wonderful. Memorize, you fantasize the warmth it brings, the pain it stings, those parts you leave exposed. Half alive and half it high on what you could but never would. Sober now, I suppose. What is what you got if not the whole? A whole lot of what it is nothing so wonderful. Laugh away your better days and gather them, the better than the best when in one place. I could die 1,000 times, and yes, I did. I tried to live 100,000 more. Why, oh why can I not close your eyes? Is it that which might appear it hypnotized? Eyes is what is disappointing you, my love. Wish it could be something other than love. More wonderful. Cabin in a fever, 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 cabin in a fever. Behind in my old mind is by my alright. Behind in my own mind is by my oh, I wish I didn't know.
All right, wonderful. That by Louise Betancourt. I was going to ask, or the thought came into my mind as you were playing that, how your music or the lyricism in your music has changed since moving back to Vermont, and then you kind of went into that refrain where it was cabin fever, and now, admittedly, you did come back during COVID, so, I mean,
Yes,
you could have very well been writing that in Brooklyn, I'm sure.
Right.
But has that been the case? Have you seen more lyrics talking about this area that you're in and kind of more of the culture and community here versus well, not versus Brooklyn, but how your lyricism has changed because of that place change.
Absolutely. I think like moving back here, it definitely was an adjustment, and lyrically, at least with this song, I was trying to do. I find that being in a different place, different space, different town, whatever, like always brings out something new, like some kind of new melody or some new words, and so this one like kind of came out really fast. And it was on a day where I wasn't feeling. It was in January, so it was the pits of winter, and like we were definitely felt a bit of like a struggle. So I was trying to write, or I just felt like in a better mood that day or something, and so that's what this came out, and I was kind of really trying to reflect a little bit on that journey to where I find myself now, and that always, I feel like a lot of my older songs lyrically might have like been a little darker or maybe a little bit more heady. So if anything, I feel like this move has just kind of opened me up a little bit more to trying to write in a different way with like a different lens, I guess, right? Like, it's like, it sounds a little cheesy maybe, but like writing with different colors, you know what I mean? Like, so, but a lot of times I usually get the music first, and the melody first. So the words, this one was like a lot more automatic. Some songs I just really.
As a melody comes first, and I am not a songwriter, I do not have a musical bone in my body, which is why I do this rather than play any music. So I can, be part of it in some way or another. But I would imagine if the music comes first, that is really the subconscious coming through, and then you write the lyrics to match. And it's not like you really get a choice of what that melody is going to be. That's just going to be the product of your environment at the time. Does that make sense? Or
Yeah,
is that
absolutely.
not how you see it?
It is very much a subconscious. Like, I mean, for me, that's always been lyrically, like the impetus is just, like sometimes I'll just get some whole placeholder words to fit the melody and the rhythm. And those end up being, I'm like, oh, well, I don't need to change those. Why? Like this one, I had that first line, like memorize your fantasize. And I don't know why, it just came out. But it made a lot of sense because I think sometimes we like forget about, the things that we fantasize about. Like, that's okay. Like, that's as real as anything else, So kind of holding on to some of that stuff.
I personally find it interesting when you a reflection of what you were fantasizing back maybe 6, 12 months ago, a year, 2 years, and then you actually having that in that moment, and then obviously it's being different because the fantasy is never going to kind of fit with reality, but kind of having that sudden jolt of realizing that the thing you actually fantasized about such a long time ago is actually your current reality. It sometimes kind of comes as a jolt.
Yeah.
I'd imagine when you were sitting in Brooklyn and thinking about Vermont, you probably had a lot of fantasies of what this would be.
Yes.
Has that actually fit kind of what you were imagining?
The
Obviously, it never
reality
can
of it?
properly, but
In some ways, yes. I think, I think when I closed my eyes in Brooklyn and thought about us moving back, like I definitely thought about wide open space and, and water and trees and just being much more in tune with nature, and I feel like that has definitely played out. But yeah, there are certain things that I hadn't been here in 24 years or whatever, so I felt like, or I'd been here, I'd visited, but I still had held on to those experiences I had when I was in high school growing up, and I was like culturally, sometimes I was like, oh, this is gonna be a big shift, but I find overall, especially since COVID has kind of dissipated a little bit, cross your fingers, it's just been meeting more people. I think that's it. I think the richness of life's experiences, the people in your life, and so we've met a lot more people in the last few months, and it's like, oh wait, there's life, and
yeah, right.
There's interconnectivity in it. That's inspiring.
It's like a switch in May where all the people suddenly come out to the street or, into the bay, and you're like, hold on a second, I don't remember any of you people for the last 6 months.
Right, where were you?
Pop out of a hole or something? Where have you been? And it's actually just been people scurrying from cars to buildings, and that's why you've not really seen them. In Brooklyn, obviously, there was this huge community. You were very intentional about meeting that community with the showcase. Obviously, North Hero, you're not going to get as many people kicking around. Right. Has that affected your songwriting and producing music? Because you are more in isolation, not obviously really out of choice, but more out of circumstance.
Right. Yeah, I've been I feel like, especially we moved last July, so for the better part of the fall and the winter, early spring, I find myself experimenting more. I have more space to make music physically. I have like an actual room that doesn't have to double as like a bedroom.
Right. You're not doing any roommate's room as he's out getting the shopping or something.
The kids' playroom is right there and it's slowly encroaching, but that's cool. But yeah, I feel like I've just been more willing to be a little bit more experimental again, which I used to be. And then I kind of like got tied into like the songs I was performing as a solo artist, as a band, and so I've I bought a couple synths, and I've been like just looping things, and just I brought a piano back from Brooklyn, and I never really played piano, just dabbled. So I spent a lot of time with all the extra time I had in the winter, trying to teach myself and write on that as well, like use a different instrument to write. So, But yeah, now I've been performing a lot in the past few months, and I've definitely found some community in even in North Hero. Like there's a couple breweries out there that are doing live music, like Kramer and Ken and Two Heroes, and
I love
people there are wonderful and like so welcoming, and so I've been kind of helping organize shows there and try to bring other musicians into the fold.
I love that you're still doing the organising. I swear, once you get started with organising, it's very difficult to stop. Finding
power in numbers, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. You mentioned earlier on you had a collaboration partner, Ronnie Fell, who you played with for 5-6 years, something like that.
Yeah, we played. I mean, we've known each other for almost 20 years, and we played together for the majority of that. So we recorded even before we started with like a drum machine, and I was playing bass and he was playing guitar, but we're both songwriters, so.
And you played, obviously a lot in New York, all around New England, and so it feels like, or at least from the impression I got, that you were more of a duo in that stage of your musical career, whereas now you're far more of a solo artist. What experiences do you take from that kind of situation as a duo, kind of like as a partner in music, that you've now brought with you into that solo sphere?
I mean, it was a duo, but then it quickly became a trio with my friend Raj, who's the drummer.
Best drummer in the world.
It was like an astronomical change from a drum machine. Yeah, I mean, in that band, in our band Avo, we did like almost like a 50-50 split of songwriting and singing and vocals. So it forced me to try to get into his head a little bit of how he writes a song, and it's so different than the way I would write a song, and so I feel like that cross-pollination of ideas and influence. I mean, we had a lot of the same musical influences, but the way we filtered those out into what we were writing was very different, and that was like I think the magic of that chemistry for me, and we're still playing music and writing music together. He bounces around a lot, but he's in Burlington right now. So, and my buddy Rob plays drums. So we've been working on something new.
I was gonna say, have you had the opportunity to kind of get back into some kind of, at least a practice space to kind of figure something out? But it sounds like you have.
Yeah, I mean, I have. It's funny. I have a barn. So when we found this house, I was like, oh my god, a barn! I'm gonna turn that into like a recording studio and rehearsal space. I mean, that's slow going.
Yeah.
But yeah, my buddy Rob, he runs Pitchfork Farms, and
oh, nice.
Yeah.
My office space is right next to there.
Oh yeah.
In the soda plant, yeah.
Awesome. Small town.
Yeah, it's very small town.
But yeah, he has he has a little loft in his wash station, and that's where we rehearse sometimes. Although gets pretty hot up there these days. But yeah, and we just recorded in my basement, like, so, like, we're finding some space, but whenever and wherever we can it's kind of nice. So
Actually, I'm going to save this one till after the next song. So, yeah, what have you got for us?
all right, so the next song is it's a bit of an older song. Song I wrote probably like 12 years ago or whatever. It's called Arc, and it's I wrote this actually up in Vermont, like at a friend's house, and it's definitely much more of a reflection on myself, as most songs are, but also on a friend I had lost years ago. So this is, I guess, a way of processing it. Underwater open, heart becomes a sloping, brain rejects the eye. Through a body under, what exactly wonder? Just a cloud of white. I was younger than I thought it poetry. I was an arc for flood, filled with pretty faces, perfect hiding places, and a taste for blood, for blood, for blood. Little bridges burning, and the dance of morning made it disappear. Widows in the windows, windows in the water, water in my ear. There were gains and there were things I lost in transit, things I threw away. Little pieces of the people once collected, hoping that they'd stay, they'd stay, they'd stay. Away, away, away. I was in the garden when the rain had started to leak up through the earth, and I knew these are empty pages, begging for the cages where the wild are tamed. Dreaming doesn't soothe me, dreams they run right through me till they clog the drain. There were falling stars out in the yard, but they were buried in the snow. Instead I chased a comet, grabbed its tail, got on it. I refused to ever let it go. So the crunch beneath your toes is a star now decomposed in a freshly fallen snow.
Arc there by Louise Betancourt. So as you mentioned, that was a song about a friend you lost. When you're writing songs like that, as you mentioned, you wrote it 12 years ago, and I don't know how long ago you lost your friend. In those kind of songs with like such stark emotions, be it obviously loss, grief, or joy, elation, do you need to write those in the moment, or is it a case of you can kind of go back at a later stage and kind of almost lasso that feeling from such a long time ago and kind of bring it back to you and write about it? And if you do that, how does that contrast between those songs you wrote in the moment?
Yeah, I feel like that this song in particular was written years removed. I almost find it easier to write a little bit more coherently and lucidly with some distance. I know a lot of people are like, oh, just process your grief or process your pain through art, but I don't find that it's always that automatic, and sometimes I find myself doing the very opposite, like writing a very upbeat song, like in a time of duress or whatever. But yeah, this song, I find that a lot of my songs are kind of much more image driven and heavy, and so this song wasn't, I don't think, consciously about that loss so much as like, there's a line like through a body under just a cloud of white or whatever, and I did spread this woman's ashes, and I remember that being a very powerful image in my mind in spreading them in water, and I feel like that kind of juxtaposed with like looking outside of another friend's window where I was staying when I wrote the song and looking at the snow, and it just, I guess, triggered some of those feelings, and that those feelings come out in the music, I feel like, more than in the words almost, because it's not directly, about this loss or this person's death.
So I guess it's more that, you kind of had this experience, and then later on in life there's these moments that you can't really control that kind of ping those neural pathways again, and you kind of remember, and because of that space you're actually able to fully process it at that point, or get closure from it, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah. Some closure, I think, is also achieved in that kind of moment. I was just thinking about, I was now just looking at the words and like, oh yeah, it's like a lot of it is kind of like reflecting on who I was when that loss happened, and how I've changed, and how, you change with the way you change in response to losing someone, right? So
right. As a singer-songwriter, it was quite remarkable to like kind of flick back through some of those old songs, or even write about times when you were younger, and it's almost, you've got like an archive of yourself, of these emotions, these feelings, of where you are. I'm kind of jealous of that. I mean, I'd have to go back through my Google Docs and read some very dry policy paper or something like that, and realize, maybe I was bringing in the feelings about losing someone at that point in time. That's why I was feeling so terse or something,
It's interesting. I mean, it could come out in any spreadsheet, maybe.
Right, exactly, yeah. So I want to talk about the new album you've got out. So it's called Find It Feels.
Yes.
It's the third solo album. I read of the other two, Plan in 2021, and you had your first in 2013, which unfortunately I didn't write down.
It's probably I think my 13th.
Oh my God,
album.
I'm way off.
No, you had the three of us, right? And honestly, like a lot of it's gone through different incarnations. Like there was one album that had like some other musicians playing with me, but most of them have been just me. So yeah, this one I released in the spring.
Yeah.
And it was definitely more of my New York, that classic transition album, right? So I wrote most of those songs, and actually in my next to Jalopy, there's a tavern that the owners of Jalopy own, and it's also called Jalopy. And during the pandemic, it was closed a lot, and so I'm a teacher, I'm a special educator, and so I'd go in there at nights just to get a little space to lesson plan, and then I'd end up, grabbing a guitar or whatever, and I ended up writing most of the songs on this album there and it definitely, I think, reflects a little bit more of the weariness with COVID and like the sadness, but it also the anxiety of uprooting my family and moving, and I don't know, there's definitely a heavy influence, like a lot of my musical influences I think are a little bit more direct in this, like Elliott Smith, for instance, is like a huge influence, and I find some of the songs I'm like, oh, those are remarkably Elliott-like. But I finished it here, so yeah, I mixed it when we moved and tweaked some things, but
So it's kind of got a foot in both camps, this album. As you said, it's a transitional album. So
Yeah.
that kind of, that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, actually, one of the songs on it was the first song I wrote when I moved, and I just felt like, feeling-wise, it like kind of belonged on this album versus my next, first Vermont album. So.
And this one came out quite quickly after the one in 2021, Pan. So
Yeah.
there must have been a lot of thoughts you were having at that time. You must have been quite brimming with some creative energy to go from. I'm assuming in 2021 you didn't write most of those songs, but it was probably the year or two before, and then you had that album, and then the album came out just a year later.
Yeah.
If you feel like you're coming out or still within this creative space?
It was interesting, those two albums next to each other. The one before it, Pan, was more of an electronic album. I actually torn a ligament in my thumb, and I was in therapy, hand therapy, for right when the pandemic broke out. And so then, of course,
Right.
you can't. That was an impossibility. So I ended up switching to just mostly keys and synth and electronics. I was very much like, one of my great loves is Arthur Russell, and I was very much into what he had been doing later in his life. And so that kind of inspired that. But meanwhile, as I was gaining strength in my hands, I was writing like some guitar licks and things. So I feel like I had like some riffs that were like
Ready-made.
ready-made and ready to go for the next album.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a return to the guitar for me, so to speak.
So you've already kind of alluded to potentially bringing out another record that's pure Vermont, in the barn, written, recorded, all the rest of it. Is that something that you see close on the horizon, or is this kind of more of a, all right, kind of got my feet under the table now, I'm going to let this simmer, let the last album kind of sit, and then I'm going to get around to this last one when I have time for it? This
one, I guess I've been taking a little bit more time writing songs since I moved back. I mean, a part of it is just the adjustment to a new life, and also the fact that I have a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old.
Yeah.
Like my 2-year-old Paloma, she's running around everywhere now. So it's I guess I don't find as much time to write, which is fine. I feel like building up experiences, new experiences, helps with the writing. So. But that being said, yeah, I mean, I was over the winter, I was, like I said, teaching myself how to play piano. And the only way I can teach myself, because I don't have the patience for charts and stuff, was to write songs, and they all probably sound the same. But it's funny because I have like 8 piano songs with melodies and lyrics and words, but I would never play live, probably.
Yeah.
Because I can't.
They're not ready
keep
yet.
it together, but it's there. It's like one of those lost albums. But
kind of like a nebula, and eventually it's going to coalesce into like a star, but at the moment it's still very much nebulous.
Yeah. But right now I'm just trying to experiment with like new sounds, right? So I'm just I wanted to do something very different. I'm kind of restless, like stylistically. So.
And I'm sure having that 2-year-old, as you said, doesn't afford you a lot of time, especially with the 6-year-old as well. Although I'm sure the 6-year-old's probably a little bit more independent now.
Yeah, she is.
But I don't have kids myself, but I can imagine as someone creative like yourself, as you said, it kind of, those experiences are just kind of filling up the tank. And eventually you're going to be able to use that fuel, but at the moment it's just kind of like sitting there ready and wait.
That's perfectly said, actually. That's exactly what it is, yeah.
Before I let you play us out, you did say you've been busy this summer, you've been playing at a couple of great breweries, and tell us where we can watch you play, if you've got any more gigs for the rest of the summer, and if people want to give you a listen, where will they find you?
Oh, great. Yeah, I mean, I just did a long string of shows at various places, including, even down at the Ramble at Maudit Poutine, and played at Arrowhead Lodge in Milton last Friday night. It was actually a wonderful space and wonderful people. My next gig is August 27th at the Kramer and Kin Brewery in Alberg, actually. So it's a little further up there. But they just opened that spot in April. They've been really trying to foster weekly music series there. So I'm playing with my dear friend Jennifer Milich, who actually lives in Brooklyn, and she's a wonderful, amazing songwriter in her own right. And so we, for years, have actually shared bills together. So this is kind of going to be a special show, August 27th, where she's going to play a set, I'm going to play a set, and hopefully we'll play a couple songs together. But otherwise, now that the school year is
Right.
on the horizon, I'm hoping to keep playing as much as possible. I used to play Radio Bean a lot years ago, and whenever I came back into town, so just try to keep as many shows going. I have a band camp that is the easiest place to find all my music, and then I have like Spotify and all that stuff. But just find me on social media. I'm trying to book it's crazy. It went from like 0 shows I couldn't kind of break into it.
Right.
I think it's also COVID. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like
That's sort of
there's
it,
nothing
yeah.
happening, and then all of a sudden there's like all these wonderful musicians trying to like play out. So
At the start of this year, we all kind of went back into lockdown briefly, I feel, just before spring really hit. And,
That's right.
we were meant to have a whole thing, the Arts Riot, and that whole thing got shut down. And, kept hearing from other artists that there was nowhere to play. And then all of a sudden, as you've been saying, there was an embarrassment of riches when it comes to how many available slots there were around the state. So
absolutely. But it's great. I mean, the energy's there, and it's nice to like find all these little pockets of community. Yeah, I'm hoping to get together a band and go out there and start rocking out a little bit more too.
Well, tell more people you've got a band to play in, and I'm sure they'll come calling immediately.
Yes.
Would love to hear a final song. So what you got for us?
All right. So I have. Let's see here. Now I have like I said, quite a little collection here. This one is one I don't actually play out often, but it's a song I wrote years ago, but right before we had our first kid. So it's called Belly. When the clouds pour from your tear ducts and a lotus blooms on your tongue, and you chew more than you can swallow, know that time bends to the ways we contend and relent. Sit down, I'll bring you some water. Breathe in, I'll bake us some bread. We'll eat it in bed. And the forest that grows on my head is the perfect nest for your eggs. Though at times my feet drag, know I'll be ready when a child swims in your belly. But to home at last, whenever, however it happens. Home at last. Didn't it happen so fast, baby, baby? And my elbows get caught on my toes, and my eyelids get caught on my clothes.
Betancourt, playing us out there with Belly. Thank you so much for coming in. This has been great.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's a
Yeah.
wonderful experience.
Anytime. And looking forward to that new album. Please come back in when it's done and so you can
Awesome.
play it to us and promote it and all the rest.
Love it. Thank you. All right. Cheers.
Well, you can catch us next week where we're going to have the Tyler Mass Band in. But for tonight, this has been WOMMLP, operating out of Burlington, Vermont, 105.9 The Radiator, The Rocket Shop. I've been your host, Tom Proctor, and good night.
Cool. Cheers. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. This is really nice, man.
Appreciate it.
Beautiful voice. I didn't even get to...